okay, Dad, you've been telling me I could be anything I want. So what happened to you?
Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Fat. I am your host, Big Ron. Thank you so much for tuning in, downloading the podcast. I certainly do appreciate that. It's the podcast where we tell beautiful, messy human stories and to let you know that you're not alone and give you some tips to help keep the darkness at bay. Today, I'm talking to a longtime friend from over in the UK. Please welcome Dan Thomas. Dan.
How you doing, man? Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's so good to see you, man. And actually talk to you like face to face instead of like, messaging.
DMs don't really cut it today.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good to see you. Dan, I met actually when I was kind of first starting the podcast. Travis Brown hit me to some of the cool stuff that you were doing as far as like growing Instagram accounts. You're an entrepreneur. You're a mentor. You really help folks chase after their passions. And so it was so cool to kind of like see from the outside, like, ooh, look at all the cool he does. And then like kind of get into the inner circle and to really get to know you as just such a great human being. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. The time difference is taking a while for us to be able to arrange this, but I'm glad it worked out because it's like you're like 5 hours ahead of where we are.
Yeah, we're a bit of a way over, but not too far, Yeah. It's not as bad as Pacific.
Yeah, true. It's funny, I was telling you before we started, it's like you're actually closer to my oldest son, Jacob, than I am now because he's over there down in the Cornwall area of England. So, again, thank you so much for being here. And if you see Jacob, tell him I said, hey.
I will. Don't know what he looks like.
Right. Just random people. Be like,
I'll just shout his name out.
Jacob!
I'll just go to Cornwall and be like, Jacob!
Right. So Dan, you right now you're helping folks to like build their social platform to find a cool niche of what they want to do and to help people. How did you get started in doing that type of stuff? Helping people. I mean, I feel like you're very like likable, like you like to see people succeed type person. Is that something from even as a child that you were the kind of the enabler?
I think so. I think I've always been a ringleader.
Yeah.
I feel like if it weren't for me, none of my friends would ever see each other ever.
Really?
Yeah. Well, someone has to organize stuff.
Yeah.
You end up being the WhatsApp guy. Like, guys, maybe we should see each other. It's been like, 2 years. Like, maybe we should actually see each other. Oh, yeah, well, I can't make that date. So I guess I've always kind of been someone who kind of like brings people together.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of really focused my whole career on that.
Mm-hmm.
Where I first came out of school, I went over to Sydney and I learned to be a scuba diving instructor over at Sydney at 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was fun in my gap year and scary because that's a long way away from home for a 19-year-old.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, just not to mention we hear so much about the native wildlife of the waters around Australia as well. With, Great White.
It's Sydney, so it's not Great Barrier Reef. So, if you're like, oh my God, I love diving, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Sydney.
It's a little
but there's some good stuff over there, but I wouldn't say it's number one on the Aussie coastline when it comes to diving. It just happened to be that was that was where the kind of like the package that I went with available because I was only an advanced open water diver at that point, which is relatively early stages. So I basically learned all of the qualifications all the way up to instructor level and then qualified as an instructor whilst I was out there.
So what's what's that depth at? I was PADI certified and I think it was just open water. So like 60 feet, I think it was my max that I could go to. So
Yeah, I think the deepest dive we did was about 80 meters or so, which
Whoa.
is, gets pretty scary by
Yeah.
that point. It's like, especially when you're doing recs at that depth, because then you're like, you can't see above you.
Yeah.
And you got to use like rope lines through ships at the bottom of the sea. And, if you get stuck, you're just basically going to drown. So, it's, so it was pretty scary, but at times, but it was also, a lot of fun. I think what I found was, I always loved the scuba diving, but I think I found a real energy for teaching. Yeah. And for me, that was kind of the bit that I most enjoyed. The scuba diving was fun, but it was kind of the teaching that I enjoyed the most, whether that be, teaching people on the beach or classroom work, that was always something that I really enjoyed. And then I carried that forward with me when I went to university, because when I came back from diving, I got into this stupid thing called breakdancing for some reason. And then went to university and tried to find a society at university, and naturally there wasn't one.
There was no breakdancing society? I mean,
there's no breakdancers. So it turns out that in a very, very upper class Southwestern university, they don't have a breakdancing society. So who'd have thought it?
I mean, golly.
God, I know, right? Shit, isn't it? So I was like, well, I just wanted to hire a room. I didn't want to run a society. I just wanted to hire a room so I could practice. And they said, well, you can't hire a room unless you run a society. So I just ended up running a society.
Oh, wow.
And it became huge. I mean, we ended up having 300 members by the end of the first year. And then, it just really, really took off. And I think the thing with breakdancing is it's a great place for sort of misfits and outcasts. Yeah. Like it's, it's not the mainstream rowing club, rugby club, posh boy stuff. It's kind of like the guys that like don't fit in.
Yeah.
Kind of like, so it attracted a really big contingent of people that just wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And so I ran that for the entire duration of when I was at university. Yeah. And then that carried us to some really amazing places. So we toured, Europe a lot with that. And some of our guys now are still competing on a global scale. We have a couple of guys from my former crew that have now qualified into the GB Olympics. So you'll see some of our breakers in the GB Olympics as well. So it's like, that's long way past. Because when I was first starting the society, I didn't know shit about shit. I mean, literally I was just like making it up as I go along. And to really show my age, this was kind of the days. This was like the year 2000, right? So the internet didn't really exist at that point. It kind of existed, but it wasn't like you could just go and find anything out. And, there weren't really, YouTube barely existed by that point, right? So if you wanted to try and learn anything, you just have to kind of make it up as you go along.
Yeah.
So I was just making it up as I go along. But the guys picked up the mantle and carried it into, really high heights in my absence after that, and it's always really exciting to see those guys,
that's
go crazy
amazing.
With this stuff.
That's amazing. So, I mean, well, what were you at university for? Like, what was your line of study? What were your,
well, initially I wanted to do network administration. So I took a degree in computer science, only to find that degree was like entirely programming based, and I am not good at programming at all. So I basically scraped through year one and then ended up in a failing trajectory on year two. Oh, wow. So then I tried to change my degree at that point, but I was too late to catch it first thing. So I had to work locally for the rest of the year in year two and then start a whole new degree in year three. Oh, so I was actually at university for 5 years overall. And then I ended up graduating in economics, which was my kind of second thing that I was interested in.
Oh, wow.
3 years later. So, that's kind of how I then fell into financial services. Was I applied for a grad scheme on financial services and managed to get one of very few coveted places on a grad scheme with one of the major banks in the UK, and then spent, the next 12 years in financial services, working initially in the marketing function, and then in internal communications. And then I moved into collaboration. I think that's where a lot of the skill sets that I carry forward today really came through, was when I started working in the collaboration space, which is basically convincing people to work with each other, but also implementing enterprise level communities and knowledge-based communities into businesses.
Yeah.
So essentially, how do you extract the information that everyone in large businesses refuse to share and turn that into, internal databases and networks and societies and clubs? And at this point, this was for Lloyds Bank. So they had over 100,000 staff. So I ended up running the enterprise community network for Lloyds of 100,000 plus people. And then basically doing a lot of tour in the UK, doing a lot of collaboration and workshops and webinars, literally thousands. I think I calculated when I left Lloyds, I clocked up 2,000 webinars by the time I'd left Lloyds.
Wow.
So, or workshops. So a lot of working.
Yeah.
But I've kind of always enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed teaching, presenting, facilitating. That's always been something that I think's really been the common thread for me in terms of what I'm good at and what I can do easily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the evidence of, the teaching and the scuba diving, the putting the society together for the breakdancing. I mean, you're that's so cool that you're very good at it, but also that, again, you have this charisma about you that people want to be in your atmosphere. You know what I mean? They want to be around you. They want to do what you're doing. They want to hear what you have to say. So I think that.
Well, what I learned from breakdancing, and this was, I learned this sort of only a few years ago, but it was quite profound, at least for me, was when someone comes into breakdancing, especially guys, right? None of these guys can dance, especially white guys, especially can't dance.
Yeah.
So, they kind of like stand there and move their shoulders and shuffle their feet and don't really do anything. And they're locked in their shell, right? They're locked in this shell of like what other people think of me, So they're like, oh, I'm just going to look like a dumbass. I'm not going to do anything. And of course, with breakdancing is like the total opposite of that. Breakdancing's in your face, high energy, and, everyone's looking at you kind of thing. So it's a totally, total dichotomy between where people come in and what's being asked of them.
Yeah.
I would say almost the most extreme, transition from one to the other.
Yeah.
And so when we used to go out to the clubs, we used to create these sort of circles where we would basically go to a club, a busy club, and then we create a big circle of all of the breakdancers. And then, within that circle space, then you'd have all the breakdancers jumping in and then doing their sets and doing their thing. But within that circle, you kind of like be hooping and hollering and cheering people on.
Yeah.
And then we would get the new guys, particularly, to kind of like join the circle and just do anything at all, right? Obviously, they'd done one lesson, and they'd come out in the evening, and we would be getting them to dance in front of hundreds of people after one lesson, which but like we were hooping and hollering and stuff. And as soon as you kind of like broke that shell, they would be totally unlocked.
Oh, wow.
And what I realized was that ring of people all hollering and cheering created this sort of safe space where they could be themselves and where they're allowed to be themselves. And I realized that the creation of that safe space is really the key to leadership.
Yeah.
It's how do you create a safe space in which people can experiment, learn, do, express, and be themselves without fear of judgment, without fear of repercussions. Yeah. And if you can be someone that creates those safe spaces, then people will gravitate towards you.
Yeah.
So when it's come to my content, what I try and do with my content is I try and strip it back and, be very frank, and I'm messing around and I'm swearing and I'm just kind of like, just operating as I normally operate. Yeah. Right. But the reason why I'm doing that is because that level of authenticity and rawness creates a safe space for other people to step into.
Yeah.
And then they look at that and they say, well, if Dan's doing that, then I can do that too. And so essentially what you do is by creating that safe space, you then give people permission to be able to do the same. Mm-hmm. And that's the secret to magnetic brands is you create a safe space that gives people permission to be able to do the same. And that's how you empower people.
Yeah.
You take on their fear by doing the thing that they're afraid to do. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, they are then empowered to do the same. Not to the same extent, but they're empowered to take one small step towards what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the key to great leadership. You know, they always, you know, they say there's a difference between being a manager and a leader. You know, the leader creates the safe space so that the people that they're working with feel like they can come to and talk and collaborate and experiment and try and be okay if something fails. And, you know, whereas a manager is like, go do this, you're doing this wrong, go do this, you know, as opposed to making it more organic, like you say, and setting the example.
Yeah. Well, managerial environments are, you know, dictatorial and punitive, you know, they don't really reward very much. And, you know, again, I spent, 8 years in collaboration trying to convince people to work together. And what I realized is, the more you can get people to work out loud, the more you can get people to share things early, the more you can get people to, work in a more agile way, the better the end result is for everyone. Yeah. Because it's more inclusive and, it's more collaborative and it's a result that you actually share. Whereas if you just say, hey, I'm a manager, I've designed something, go build it, that's not inclusive. That's just someone operating and doing what you think you should be doing. So, if you really want to bring people together, you have to work out loud, fail out loud, and strip back the things that, you normally put in place. I always say to people, you don't build a personal brand. You remove the blockers that prevent your brand.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't build a brand by I get to know you and we talk about stuff. You build a brand by me removing the blockers that are between you and me. So if I choose to not share stuff with you, you know me less. Right? Or if I choose to not act like I normally act on video, on socials, then you know me less. I think the reason why people feel like they know me and the reason why people feel like my content is authentic in inverted commas is because I just make content how I speak.
Yeah.
And I just make content how I think. And people are like, well, how do you be more authentic? And it's like, you're not more authentic. It's just that you remove all the things that are taking away from your authenticity.
Yeah.
I.e., if you get on camera, but the only way you're going to get on camera is with a suit and tie, but you would never ever wear a suit and tie at home, that's a lack of authenticity, right? You're putting that blocker between you and I because you think or you want me to perceive you in a certain way that is different to how you actually are. And so, authenticity, brand building, and leadership, all of these elements, it's actually a very simple solution. And that simple solution is strip away the blockers between you and them. If you're a leader and you walk around acting like, you're the boss and you're smarter and cleverer and everything has to come from you and your decisions come from you are final and that you always make the right decisions, then, people aren't going to relate to you and they're not going to connect with you because it's clearly not true. It's demonstrably not true.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas, if you're open to do that and say, well, hey guys, everyone makes mistakes. I don't know what the answer is. We're going to work this out together. We need to put strategies together. I don't know what the strategy is. I don't know what the answer is. But at the same time, when those mistakes happen, you become the safe space and you absorb that impact. So let's say your team does do something collaboratively but it doesn't work out and someone gets in a shit for it. You take the fall for that because you're a leader. That's your job. That's how you build strong teams. That's how you build strong connections, is you act in an inclusive way whilst simultaneously protecting the people, around you. Like, it's not as difficult as people say or think it is.
Right.
It really isn't. It's just,
Yeah.
stop putting all these walls between us.
Yeah.
And we'll know each other better. It's like everyone, if you think about, well, your best friend, well, why are they my best friend? The first thing that most people say is, oh, we just know everything about each other. That's why they're my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a funny expression? You're my friend because I know everything about you. Isn't that? I find that funny in the sense that that's not a statement to do with how you treat each other. It's just a statement of how well you know each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I find that quite fascinating in the sense that I really do think that, friendship is based on a depth of sharing.
Yeah.
And it's up to you as to what level you choose to share at.
Yeah.
I don't share everything about my life on social. I don't share about all my family and my kids and stuff because I choose not to. And that's okay. I understand that we don't, me and my followers don't have a family relationship in that regard because I don't share the dad life that I live in my socials. And that's okay. I've chosen that, but I'm actively chosen to do that. Mm-hmm. And therefore I know that that's a choice that I've made.
Yeah.
But everything else that you see is just me shooting the breeze most of the time, fucking things up.
So, and I love that. And I love that you're doing this now. So did this side of you, was there a switch that clicked? You said you were at Lloyd's for like 12 years. Was that like right out of that you're like, you know what, I need to do something for myself? Where did you decide to become the entrepreneur and like, you know what, I'm going to take all these things and I really want to share these things? Yeah.
So I spent about 12 years at Lloyd's. And then I kind of hit about a dead end, promotionally and from a career progression. Mm-hmm. So I left Lloyd's, to go into consulting. And then I started working for people like Morgan Stanley, Tesco, IKEA. I had a residency in New York for a while, and Morgan Stanley office in New York for about a year or so. I used to work out of that office in New York. I wanted to really kind of like get out and see more of the world and have more opportunities. But at the same time, I'd been trying to grow out my social media for that entire duration. Mm-hmm. I'd had YouTube accounts, Instagram accounts, podcasts, all of which had failed at that point. And I was enjoying the consulting, but it was long hours. It was good money, long hours, a lot of travel, that's consulting. Mm-hmm. And then this big thing called COVID happened. Mm. And what I think COVID did was we all got used to working every day with distractions. We could meet people around water coolers and we could go out for lunch and we could natter away down in the cafe. Mm. And we could do all of these different interactions every day that distracted us from the actual work. Mm. And I think what COVID did was it took away all the distractions and it left people with just the work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for me, just the work was Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting over and over and over again. But moreover, what I started to realize was I had to prove my worth to every single person in every single room that I went into. So even though I would work with companies that hired me mm-hmm. to be the advisor, I'd still have to come in and try and impress people all the time. Mm. Right. And, I'm sure everyone listening feels the same thing. It's like, do you feel like you're having to constantly prove your value?
Yeah.
Even though you're the expert. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I just got sick of having to constantly defend myself all the time.
Oh, wow.
And it bugged the shit out of me. And then when you combine that with Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, all the travel and all the life, consulting's quite a, it's a difficult lifestyle. It's also quite a glamorous lifestyle in the sense that you go out for drinks a lot. You travel a lot, you go out for drinks, you socialize, right. All of that got stripped away. And then suddenly all that was left was, all these people that I have to kind of, influence in inverted commas in order to be able to kind of like believe what I said. Even though I'd had all this data and all this evidence and all of this stuff I could throw at them, and I could literally say, look, this is the data. You know, I shouldn't have to convince you. This is the data. You know, it's
right.
like, what are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, I have to change this now. And I knew the whole time, I knew there was this part of me that had been suppressed since I left university. You know, that part of me was the guy that would go out to a club with like 50 of his breakdancing mates and just tear some shit up in this club, you know, and just walk into the middle of a club and like just create a massive dance floor and then just like tear shit up kind of thing. Yeah. You know, and then I kind of course, straight after uni, got thrust into financial services, which is suit and tie, button down bureaucracy, you know, and I'd done that for like, at this point, I was about 15 years or so, you know, and it was just like there was this other side of me that was just desperate to get out.
Yeah.
And it was the wild and crazy and enthusiastic and different side of me. And I knew, you know, I knew I had to find a way in order to be able to do that. And so, I was about 38 at the time. So I got a calendar and I circled my 40th birthday on there and I marked it, you know, Freedom Day. And I said, that is the day that I'm going to, you know, be working on my own by that point, you know. And I focused on then trying to grow out social media where I could actually, you know, sustain myself because I was on a good salary. I mean, I was consulting. It was a 6-figure salary. It was a good salary, you know. And at this point, I've got 3 kids. So I've got a lot, you know, of people that depend on me.
Yeah.
But I was, you know, desperate to try and escape this thing. And so I did social media again for like the 4th time. But this time I said, I'm going to act in a fearless way. I'm going to do things and take a fearless step. And I'm just going to share and do everything from my gut. And I'm just going to be my full self. And I genuinely thought this was my last chance. I really did. Because I was like, well, if I go all out 100% Dan, you know, unrelenting Dan, and people don't like me, then what else is there, right? There's nothing else. And so I genuinely thought this was like my last chance. And, you know, when you're turning 40, you have those feelings as well. It's like, you know, you're getting old, right? So I kind of like, I'm going to go all out and do it. And I started making this wild and crazy content. And it was at that point that then people started gravitating towards me. When I took that fearless step, because I took that fearless step. And then it's only now that I realized I created that safe space.
Yeah.
And people started gravitating towards me. And this was before short form video. You know, there was video on Instagram, but it was kind of like part of like carousels and stuff. It wasn't really much video on there. There was a lot of video on stories, but nowhere else. And so I was like one of the only people doing video on Instagram. And, you know, it really stood out. You know, and then people started wanting to know how I did what I did. And then people started to pay me to know how I did what I did. You know, it's at that. And then I managed to build up enough of a, you know, infrastructure to be able to finally quit my job. And I handed in my 2-week notice 2 weeks and 4 days before my 40th birthday, you know.
That's
so
great.
basically my notice finished on the Friday and my 40th birthday was on the Monday.
Nice.
And it was like, and then people said to me like, oh, Dan, you know, what do you want to do for your 40th birthday? Because I'm like, that was the only thing I wanted to do.
Yeah. You just gave yourself the best present. Yeah.
That was it. That was literally, they're like, oh, you know, what else are you? It's like, this was literally the only thing that I ever wanted to do.
That's so
this
good.
was it, you know? So, you know, if I could die happy today and go, you know, I did that big thing, you know? And, you know, I've got kids right now, you know, and we always say to our kids, you know, oh, you can do anything you want. You can be anything you want. And then they look at you and they say, okay, Dad, you know, you've been telling me I could be anything I want. So what happened to you? What happened to you, Dan? You know, you used to tell me I could be anything you want. So what happened to you? Why are you still in that job you hate? You know, why have you been working the job you hate for 40 years? You know, you always used to talk about how you love this. Why didn't you go and do that, Dad? You know, your kids are going to call you on your bullshit at some point in your life.
Yeah. Because it's that, you know, they don't have a filter because they're kids, but also it's, you know, they're speaking in a safe space because you're mom and dad. So they have no reason to hold anything back.
No.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, you know, I felt conflicted saying to my kids, hey, kid, you can do anything and be anything you want, while simultaneously not doing what I really wanted to do. I felt very conflicted.
Yeah.
You know? I was like, am I just saying something? Am I just saying this stuff because it sounds nice? Or am I going to genuinely be a role model for my children? You know?
I love that. Yeah.
That's the difference. There's such a huge difference. You know, I do think most people are just paying lip service to that.
Yeah.
You know, because you can walk up to most people and say, and you can ask them, what's your dream? You know, and they'll say, oh, it's too late for me. You know, you're like, well, what happened to you, man? You know, it's like, you should tell everyone that you could be and do anything you want, you know? So now I don't say to my kids, oh, you can be and do anything you want. I don't say that. I can say, you can do anything you want if you're willing to work incredibly hard to do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a caveat to that. Yeah. Like, you can be anything you want if you're willing to work your ass off to do it.
Yep.
You can't be anything you want if you're not willing to. Yeah. You can't.
You know, and
that's up to you. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's okay either way what you choose to do. But, you know, I don't want them I don't want that naivety of like, oh, you know, if you will it, it will just will itself into existence. It's like, no, it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's like quitting my job was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Oh, yeah.
By miles.
Yeah.
By miles. And I didn't really have a safety net. You know, I had some money, but I didn't really have a lot of money, you know, certainly not as much money as I had when I was consulting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely understand that, you know, having lost a job at the beginning of this year, you know, I've been, quote, unemployed since the end of January and trying to make ends meet. But I'm trying to put in the hard work, like what you're talking about. I'm pursuing, voice acting and doing the training and doing what I need to do to make that happen, because that's something I've always wanted. People ask me, he's like, what would you want to do if you could do anything? I was like, if I could stay in a booth and voice characters or do commercials or whatever, because I love doing that. I love the storytelling. I love.
You'd be great at that.
That type. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But the hard thing is, part of the hard thing is to not go to the gas station and get a job. You know what I mean? To go to the grocery store, to put my time somewhere else when I could be spending it doing what I want to do. And one of the revelations I had, though, is like, you know, I got let go at the end of January. But now that I'm on this path, I consider myself now, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a sole proprietor of the Voice of Rob, and I can never get fired again, because I'm not going to fire myself. No one else has that power over me anymore, though.
No.
So,
but here's the thing, though. One thing I'm thrilled for you and all those things, but here's the thing that I do think everyone needs to realize, you know, because I am not here to bash on 9-to-5 jobs, because when I worked my 9-to-5 job, I enjoyed my time in financial services. I enjoyed my time as a consultant. Yeah. You know, there were also times when I enjoyed that. And there are loads of 9-to-5 jobs, you know, that are people's dream, right? You know, you might dream of being a lawyer. It's like, great, this is a 9-to-5 job, right? So I'm not saying 9-to-5 jobs aren't dream jobs by any stretch. And I'm not one of those, everyone should be an entrepreneur people, you know. I do think a lot of people do want to be, though. But here's the thing, though. If you do become an entrepreneur and responsible for yourself, you know, it's easy to say, well, I don't have a boss anymore. But here's the thing. You do have a boss, and your boss is you. Right. So you are now an employee of yourself.
Yep.
So you can't just ring in and go, oh, I don't feel like working today. Me.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, I feel slightly sick today, so I'm just going to skip the whole day. No, you can't do that.
That's right.
Because you have to be accountable like an employee would be accountable to their boss. So, you know, I always have two versions in my head. You know, I have the boss of me and I have the employee of me. Yeah. You know?
Yep.
And, you know, the employee of me says, oh, maybe I could just hit the snooze timer and just sleep in until 12 o'clock. And the boss of me says, get the fuck out. Get to work. You know, it's like,
exactly.
It's like, you know, it's like you still have a boss, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes if you're not careful, that boss can be worse than any boss you'd ever find in a 9-to-5 job, you know, mentally, internally, you know.
Yeah.
But Yeah, you just have to kind of like be able to wake up with that accountability, So for example,
exactly.
if you had a boss, you can go to a boss and the boss said, okay, what have you been working on today? And you're like, oh, not much really. I kind of got distracted. I ended up watching my phone for 3 hours and then, just like dotting around Google for a while. It's like you could never say that
Right.
to a boss. Like if you had that accountability, you couldn't just faff around watching YouTube for a day. Like you couldn't do that. And I think that's where people get unstuck is they think that, because they're now their own boss in inverted commas, they don't have any accountability because they're like, oh, I'll never be told what to do. It's like, well, no,
I don't know.
You've got more accountability now because now you need to do all the shit that you used to do, but you need to do it proactively.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the hard work part. When you talk about, it's like, you can be anything you want, but you got to put in the work. And I think that's the part where people break down is it gets to a point where it's a strain and it's too hard. And then they don't want to keep going. And it's like, okay, well then maybe this isn't for you, and that's fine. Again, like you said, I enjoyed all the jobs I had for other people, working in radio, working in television, even the business sales. I did enjoy that because there were parts of it I could get something from. But this is my path now is a passion, and I am determined to succeed in it.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna.
And you will, and with that mindset, you will.
Yeah, and I'm going to put the work in.
But it's. I find it funny because people say like, "Oh, it's too hard." It's like nothing ever worthwhile is easy.
Mm-hmm.
You never ever feel rewarded by having accomplished something easy, ever.
Yep.
So you look back on your life and you say, oh, what are the things that I'm most proud of in my life? Look back on it now. It doesn't matter how much of your life you've had or not had. Look back on it now and think, what are the most proudest moments of my life? None of those will be doing things that were easy.
Right.
None of them.
Right.
You'll never be proud of anything that came easy, ever. Because it just doesn't happen. That's why people run marathons. They don't run marathons because they're easy. They run marathons because they're hard. They're really fucking hard. That's why they do them. So when you say, oh, this is too hard, it's like, all right, yeah, sure, it's hard, but that's why you're going to be so proud of it.
Yeah.
That's why it's going to be a defining moment in your life because it was that hard. That's a good thing. That's what you should be. You shouldn't be going after things easy. If you want a really defining life, if you want to be able to go to your deathbed and not have a ton of regrets, you need to be actively looking for things that are hard all the time. Yeah. It's like I'm always trying to I'm never comfortable, and I don't want to ever be comfortable. Because as soon as I get comfortable, I get complacent. And as soon as I get comfortable, I start doing stuff that I don't really care about. Because if it was easy, I wouldn't be passionate to overcome it.
Yeah.
So you got to go find the stuff that you're hard at. That doesn't mean you should find the stuff that's hard, but that you are naturally gifted at. Right. That's what I think people are like, Dan, how do you find your passion? I always say to people, it's like, you will be passionate about the things you are naturally good at.
Yeah.
That's it. Why? Because you'll actually make progress. You'll actually, see results. And then you'll have a positive feedback loop where you do something, you get a good result, and now you feel good about it, and now you want to do more of it, and you'll be motivated to do more of it. Right. So go find the things you're naturally good at. And that's easy. I mean, literally just do a personality test. There's 16personalities.com. It's totally free. Go and do it now. Figure out who you are. Then go and do the stuff you're naturally gifted at. And that's how you're going to end up being, finding stuff that you're really passionate about. And when people say to me, oh, Dan, I lack motivation, it's like, it's not motivation. It's discipline. It's not motivation. It's discipline.
Yeah.
It's like I don't wake up and think to myself, oh, how do I feel today? I just get on with the shit, because I'm disciplined to do it. Like I don't, you can't be so dependent on your feelings all the time. Like you have to have the discipline to be able to work on the things that are meaningful to you, whether you feel like it or not. You just have to kind of like push through that. So go find the things you're naturally good at, and then work on your discipline to be able to show up for those things every day, no matter what.
I love that. Dan, aside from all of your content creation and Social Boom and everything that you've got going on, what's bringing you joy right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm about 2.5 years into my entrepreneurial journey now.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first 2 years of that entrepreneurial journey, that was a lot of hours,
Mm-hmm.
that was a lot of hours. And before I quit my job, I was side hustling this thing before that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first 2 years of being an entrepreneur, I was working a lot of hours, and I was very stressful, and I was, up till midnight all the time. And that, took me away from my family and my kids. And, I was burning the candle at both ends, in order to try and, get everything together. And, I enjoyed that process because I'm very dedicated to work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only now that I step back that I realized that it was, that it was causing quite a lot of stress in that. And of course, I was missing out on time with my family and kids as well. And right now, the thing that's bringing me the most joy is, I'm starting to now be able to step back, instead of like I'm starting to be able to work on the business instead of working in the business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now we have a small team that helps me with stuff. And, now I'm able to kind of like step back more, and I'm able to like find more time for me and my family.
Yeah.
And, I think that's been big for all of us. So the thing for me that's bringing me joy right now is, just I think just life on your own terms. I can't think of anything else that would bring more people more joy. It's just being like, it's just being a little bit more in control, of like, okay, I kind of like get to spend life on my own terms. I spent like 4 hours making a reel this morning, that'll get about 100 views on my new account. For people who don't think, oh shit, he's crap at reels.
Right. Yeah.
On my new account.
Right.
But it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun. So, and I'd kind of hit content wise, I'd kind of started to hit a bit of a dead end, I'd been making like similar content for quite a while. And, for those of you who don't know, I've started a new account where I'm kind of like, semi documenting my journey, kind of like telling stories about my entrepreneurial journey one day at a time.
Yeah.
And I've been enjoying that. I needed a new creative outlet, and not doing that was stressing me out. So, that's been fun too.
Well, Dan, this is the second segment of the show where we talk more about your mental health journey. I definitely believe that the more we talk about these things that kind of take us into a dark place, it's easier for folks to realize that they're not alone in that. So for you, how do you keep the darkness at bay?
I think for me, the main thing I focus on is balancing my inner voices. Right? So there are two voices in your head. There's the positive voice, and I like to think of the other voice as the protector voice.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say positive and negative. I don't believe it's negative. I think it's a protector voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one that says, we could jump off here. We'd totally make it. And then the other voice says, do you know what? You might break your legs. Maybe you shouldn't do that. It's that kind of, that kind of voice.
Yeah.
It's not the detractor voice, it's just a protector voice. It's like there to kind of like help you think twice and make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people struggle with the balance of those two voices, and one voice gets too loud, particularly the protector voice starts as a protector voice and then starts to become a detractor voice and then starts to become, an enemy voice.
Yeah.
And you can't let that happen ever.
Yeah.
And you have to be mindful of your inner voice all the time. And I always say to people, look, talk to yourself like a friend. Mm. So if your inner voice isn't speaking to you like a friend would speak to you, then I treat my inner voices like real people.
Yeah.
And I hold them accountable to what they say.
Mm.
So if my head's like going, oh, you're a piece of shit and you'll never do anything. And, there's no way you'll be able to do that. And like, you're not making any progress and everything's going to shit.
Yeah.
I literally think to myself that, I say to myself, you don't get to speak to me like that. You don't get to speak to me like that. You don't get to be like that. And this conversation is over. And until you're willing to, act in a civilized way and speak to me in a civilized way, this conversation's over and we're not going to speak anymore. And I'm able to switch that on and off, or I'm able to kind of like turn the dials of those voices, now, which I think is, something that comes with age. But the more mindful you are of that, the more you can control your emotional state. I don't have, and it's unrealistic to think, I'm just going to only be positive all the time, because that, of course, doesn't exist. And you wouldn't want it to, because then you'd be, you'd rush into things and you'd make mistakes, because you're just constantly positive. But I always try and keep my inner voices in check.
Yeah.
So that, the bad, when we talk about, the bad in life, obviously there's the bad from external events that you can't control, but how you handle those events and how you handle the everyday is, for me, is almost entirely driven by your inner voice.
Yeah.
So for me, there's two elements of that. One is balancing my inner voice, and the other is absolute accountability.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I am 100% accountable for everything that happens in my life, good or bad. And every time something does, I ask, what did I do, or what do I need to change in order to be able to make that better or worse? And I'm 100% accountable for that. I don't go around blaming other people. I don't have a victim mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I have 100% accountability for everything that I do. And it's only when I feel like I have explored every single possible permutation of my own accountability that I would ever then think about something else being someone else's fault. And I don't think I've ever found a time when that's true. But there's nothing that's ever happened really that's one single person's fault. Something I've built a lot of in my life, and I focused a lot of in my life, is resilience. So when I used to be in financial services, so there's a personality test, which is a red, yellow, green, blue. It's called the colors test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in each one of these colors is a different kind of personality type. And you've got red, which is kind of like direct. You've got yellow, which is enthusiastic, sort of energetic. You've got, I'll probably get this wrong. You've got green, which is empathetic. And then you'll get blue, which is analytical, right? And you're somewhere in this chart. You might be a combination of a couple of different places, but you're somewhere in this chart. When I did it, when I was 19 and starting my graduate scheme, I got red. So basically I was the most direct, most obsessed guy you could find, right?
Yeah.
Which was good in the sense that I was like, pushed things through. If you think about those, bosses that are like, just get shit in order. Like that was me, It was good in terms of pushing through. The problem was in financial services, financial services is bureaucratic treacle, and you're working with senior people all the time. So in financial services, it did not go down well because I wanted everyone to work, to do more, push harder and to make more progress. And I couldn't because of all the bureaucracy. So I got a lot of bad feedback for about the first 5 years of my career. I was in a lot of one-to-one sessions. I'd probably have a one-to-one session every single week. I was constantly getting bad feedback. It was a bit of a shit show, to be honest, when it comes to, what I was like.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I realized one of the reasons for that was because, I was I've always kind of worn my heart on my sleeve. And, when it came to meetings, I used to get very, very irate and anxious in meetings when, I felt like people weren't listening to me or they weren't doing what I wanted them to do. And I used to get very irate.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point within, every sort of 3 months or so, I would kind of break and I would have some moment where I said something stupid to the wrong guy,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's not, not groundbreaking, but, like just being bad tempered or being, and especially when you're working with very senior people. Right. Some of these guys are like, these are one-shot guys, right? You go in the room, you fuck it up. You're never going to meet this guy again. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really, really struggled with that. And had a lot of feedback about that. And I realized I was too emotionally charged and I was too responding too emotionally to everything. So I worked really, really strongly on my resilience and I used to wear a wedding ring, and every time I used to get really emotionally charged up, I tried to channel all of that emotional energy into my wedding ring. And I used to just sort of turn my wedding ring around my finger. And I tried to turn that resistance and that anxiety and that stress into a physical reaction. Right.
Yeah.
And then I focused on the feeling of the ring pulling around my finger and the feeling of it sort of tugging on the skin of my finger and the feeling of moving this ring around.
Yeah.
And it helped me to kind of like, like rewire, as soon as I felt that anxiety coming in, I was like, okay, just stop speaking, twist, focus on the ring. And then when I managed to calm myself down, then I could re-engage within the conversation. And then in the early days, it was difficult, but, over time, I slowly weaned myself off of it. And now I'm able to do that without wearing a ring. But in my head, I still do that when I'm feeling anxious and upset. I kind of like just, I think to myself, I kind of like visualize that ring and I kind of like, and it calms me down. And, I think for so many people, if you were to say, well, look, Dan, how do you get through the dark days, which I know is one of your questions, right? How do you get through the dark days? For me, like it starts with resilience. It has to start with, it starts with resilience and regulation. Like you need to be able to regulate your emotions, right? You need to be able to regulate. Yeah. If you are totally overwhelmed by feeling all the time, you cannot balance your two sides of your brain, on your positive and negative sides of your brain. If those are fighting all the time and you are overwhelmed by your feelings all of the time, then that's going to create physical responses like anxiety and stress. And that's going to then create very, very sharp emotional states in you, as in high levels of depression or high levels of anxiety or, overly high levels of positivity, to the point where it's naivety, it's like, and I say to people, it's like, I'm not trying to quash your, personality here, but like, you need to regulate, and you need to focus on how you regulate because, like it's, and I work with students all the time, and particularly creators, they're a very emotional bunch. They've put a lot of time, energy and effort into making something and then they gets no views and no one likes it. Or maybe they get troll comments and they get all these other, many experiences that comes from, creating content and being a creator and they just can't handle it.
Yeah.
Like they can't handle it. It's like too much, too stressful. They burn out. They get anxious. I've made 1,500 posts now, on just this one Instagram account. So that's 1,500 posts in a row, having never missed a day for 1,500 days. And I've never, ever needed to take a break, or because I feel burnout or whatever, because I plan what I do and I regulate in a way that, to protect myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we all need to, everyone knows when you really think about it, we all know what our triggers are. You all know when that anxiety is rising and when that emotion is rising and you're feeling that, that sort of anger or anxiety or stress, right? And you don't necessarily have to step out of the situation. Certainly for me, I never could because I was in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a conference. I couldn't just walk out of the conference,
right. Right.
I couldn't step out of the conversation, but you can.
But you had that ring.
Redirect your presence within the situation you're in.
Yeah, you had that ring, whether it be the physical ring or the mental ring that you could redirect.
You could redirect, and center yourself to, and just kind of go if you find yourself to be, easily angered, which I did, because I'm very competitive. Yeah. I am actually, although I'm a very inclusive person. I am actually very, very competitive, as Travis, my business partner, will tell you.
Yeah.
And, losing does stress me out and gives me anxiety, So it's like, but I know what I am. And so I know what my triggers are. And I know when I start feeling it. And now I know how to regulate from it.
Yeah.
And I wish more people would, have more education in this space. Because I do think, emotional regulation and resilience, are the number one thing that either makes or breaks a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you can really work on that, like we all have triggers of stuff, like you can't, live your life pretending your triggers don't exist. You know, a lot of them are like ingrained in you.
Yeah.
It might be from your upbringing, childhood, or how you came up or whatever. Like some of them genetic, like you're going to have things in you that are naturally triggers for you, but you can control firstly, whether you put yourselves in those situations at all. And then secondly, how you handle those situations when you're in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it starts with your presence of mind to be able to identify that in yourself, you know, whereas if you just get anxious, you know, oh my God, why am I so anxious? Why am I so anxious? Like, well, if you thought about it, you'd probably know, you know, and you should kind of know what these things are.
Yeah.
And, you know, like knowing the problem is the first step to solving the problem, which is why therapists spend their entire time diagnosing and getting to the roots of stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you want to try and fix the cause instead of constantly medicating the symptom.
Yep.
You know, because medicating the symptom is unlikely to put you where you want to be. It's like, oh God, I'm like, you know, I feel really anxious when I, you know, meet new people. So I'm going to lock myself in my house. You know, it's like, that's, you know, that's not helping you. You know, that's just pretending that those people don't exist. And you'll probably make you lonely and stressed out. You know, so it's not helping you.
It creates other problems.
It creates other problems. It creates other problems. It's like, no, it's okay. You know, and it's okay to feel anxious when you're around people, you know, but if you know that, then all right, let's put a plan together for how we help through that, you know? And I really think that anyone can really push through, you know, what aspects of their personality that they struggle with, you know, and they kind of like, that doesn't mean they can be sort of, you know, amazingly naturally gifted or something as someone who perhaps is more like that. But I do think, you know, people say, well, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. It's like, I'm not really convinced that there is such a thing as introversion or extroversion, because different people are different personalities in different situations. Yeah. You know, right now, you and me, we're having a deep conversation here, you know, but if you were to put the camera on me to make a piece of content, I'd be yelling and screaming, you know, it's like I'm too, you see what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like, it just depends on the environment in which you're in.
Yeah. Two sides of the same coin kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. People who say, oh, I'm an introvert, but then I see them with their best friends and they're having a whale of a time. It's just like, no, you just don't have a safe space.
Yeah.
But you say you're an introvert because you're trying to step into a space that isn't safe to you. And so therefore that step feels to you, you interpret that as being extroverted because it's a space that's unfamiliar to you. That's not extroversion. And you're not introverted. It's just that you're trying to step into a space that you're not familiar with. Yeah. And that's okay, you know, but like anyone can be eased into that. And I've seen literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over the years in collaboration, you know, through collaboration, through communities and through coaching. I've seen so many people come out of their shell, you know, and become totally different people. I've got a friend of mine who was, he was one of the dancers in the London 2012 Olympics. So if you saw the Olympics, there were like loads of dancers with light bulbs on their heads and they all did these amazing shows. And he was one of them. He came from the Breakdancer Society and then he became one of the dancers in the London 2012 Olympics. When I met him, he could barely string a sentence together. He was the most cripplingly shy person I've ever met in my life. Ever. He literally could barely speak. He could barely go out. You know, he would stand in front. We used to go out, you know, to the pub and he would look in the mirror for an hour, willing himself to leave the house. Wow. You know, just to be able to go to the pub, you know, and now he's like a dancer on TV. You know, he was the most introverted person I've ever met in my life, you know, so it's like, I don't think there is any one definition of anyone. And I think everyone has the power to be able to overcome that. But I think that the way that you do that is, you know, through resilience and regulation first. Okay. You're going to step into a space that isn't safe for you. And that's going to create a whole bunch of anxiety and stress for you. And I get that, you know, but all right. So let's work on regulating that. Because it's not like you don't deserve to be in that space. It's not like you're not capable of it. It's not like you're the wrong type of person. You know, you're just as capable and just as deserving as anyone else. Yeah. But we need to work on your regulation so that you can handle being in spaces like that.
All right, Dan, it's time now for the third segment of the show. It's time now for the Fast Five. The Fast Five. It's time now for the Fast Five.
Okay.
Fast Five. All right. Fast Five is powered by Poddex. It's an app created by our friend Travis Brown. As a matter of fact, if you go to chewingthefatbr.com/poddex, it'll take you to the link where you can download the app yourself. It's 5 random questions, no wrong answers. Just first thing that comes off the top of your head. All right. You ready?
I'm going to fuck this up.
All right. Question number 1.
Okay.
What was the last book you read?
That would have to be a textbook from my A levels because I don't read books.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
I listen to audiobooks. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So what was the last audiobook you listened to?
Well, in that case, Dragonlance. I'm making my way through the Dragonlance series at the moment.
Oh, nice. Nice.
That's old school.
That's yeah. But that
is really, really old school.
That's good though. That's good.
For you D&D nerds out there.
All right. Question number 2. What famous celebrity chef would you want to cater your dinner party?
Probably Jamie Oliver.
Oh, yeah.
He's a pucker lad.
Yeah.
He's good fun. He's also got some incredible entrepreneurial journeys to talk about, particularly Jamie's Italian, his chain of restaurants that ended up eventually going under. Just Google Jamie's Italian.
Okay.
And there's some really, really good podcasts. And he's very, very open and transparent about that process. Because they'd reached like $1 billion in revenue and then they collapsed. And of course, that was a very difficult moment for him in his life. So
yeah.
Definitely worth a listen.
Wow. That's awesome though. All right. I'll definitely have to take a listen to
Not
that.
Gordon Ramsay. I think he'd be a dick.
Yeah. Right. Which is weird because, it's funny. You see him when he's on like the, Hell's Kitchen and F Word. He is just the largest penis in the world. But like, if you see him with his kids in the kitchen and when he does the kids, next top kid chef or whatever it is, he's so kind to the kids. I think he just hates adults. I don't know.
Maybe. I just feel like he'd be a bit of an asshole.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Maybe just me. I think probably we would probably clash. That's it. It's not him.
Yeah, it's not him.
There's the accountability of me. It's not him. I'm not sure me and him would be the best fit.
Right. No, I love that. Yeah. Question number 3. What's the weirdest place you've gone to the bathroom?
Oh. The weirdest place I've gone to the bathroom. Probably just in my back garden.
Just out with a cup of coffee in the morning and have to take a whiz.
I just don't know why. Do you know, it's a thing. If you actually Google it, it's a getting older thing, but it's like guys peeing in their own gardens, like even though their own toilet is like adjacent to where they are.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that because it's just so pointless. I'm like, oh yeah, I wake up. I'm like, why did I piss in my own garden?
So, funny story. I've done the same thing, especially like I have to let my dog out in the morning, and I'm waiting, and I'm like, I haven't gone yet, and I'm like, you know what?
Yeah,
maybe this will motivate you if I just go ahead and start.
Yeah. I say, yeah, blame it on the dog. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just the abstract laziness of the whole thing. It's just like, it's like, let me just go kill some daffodils instead of walking 5 meters.
There you go. Question number 4. If you could meet any entrepreneur, living or dead, who would it be?
The future version of me.
Oh. Mic drop. That's an amazing answer. That is so good. I want to meet the future version of you too.
Yeah. People say to me, who's your hero? And I'm like, the future version of me who's achieved all the things I want to achieve. That's it. Like, who else would there be?
Oh, I love that.
Like, oh, do I want to meet Hormozy? Not really. Do I want to meet all these guys? Not really. They're on a different journey. They're on a different path. I'm not that interested in meeting these guys. I'm like, the only guy I'm interested in meeting is the future version of me.
I love that. And question number 5. If you could go on an adventure tomorrow, what adventure would you choose?
A global conference schedule. Mm-hmm. Basically, you just tour the world doing conferences.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're planning that at the moment. We're trying to work out how that would work out.
Mm-hmm.
But, me and Travis are working really hard on trying to put together our first event, our first conference. So, for me, an adventure would be, a world tour, conference world tour. That's life goal,
I love that. I love that.
When I was a kid, I used to live in Malaysia. So I lived in Malaysia for about 3 years in Kuala Lumpur whilst my dad worked out there. So we did a lot of Thailand, did a lot of Australia, and I've done diving in Egypt and I've gone to the US, in my time and gone around Europe. I've traveled around Europe in conferences a lot. So I've traveled a lot. There's still millions of places I need to go, but have had a decent run in terms of the travel. So worldwide adventure travel, that's not really that high on my priority list. For me, it's more, to me, the adventure would be, the next business adventure, the next level of that. That would be exciting.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, that's question number 5. And that is the show. Thank you so much for being here, Dan. I really appreciate
Pleasure.
this. If folks want to keep up with you and everything you've got going on, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me in 2 places. You can find my sort of big Instagram account at I'm Dan Thomas, I am Dan Thomas. Or you can find me at Dan Thomas Daily, which is my brand new account where you're kind of following my entrepreneurial journey day by day, step by step, whichever you would like. And I don't know when this is coming out, but, if this comes out in a month or so, then stay tuned because my podcast, The Dan Thomas Experience, will be coming out soon as well, which I'm very excited about.
Awesome.
So you'll be able to hear me while away the hours and, plug me in. I've started doing that thing with podcasts where I start listening to one and then I just kind of fall asleep. So now I kind of wake up with the shape of a headphone compressed into the side of my ear. Or on my back. Why's my back hurting? There's a headphone that's worked its way halfway down my back during the night. But now I've got dependent on it. I can't sleep without a podcast, really low volume now.
That's awesome.
So if you could, when my podcast launches, if you could just do that every night and just rack my listener time up, that would be great. Perfect. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, Dan, I'll make sure we put the links to those in the show notes. And again, buddy, I love you. I love what you're doing.
And you, my friend.
I wish you nothing but success in everything. And I know we will stay in touch. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care.
And if you would like to support this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you bought me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. But until the next time we have to sit a spell, I look forward to us chewing the fat.